Lucian had always known the sound of death. It wasn't the clash of swords or the roar of beasts. It was silence. The kind that pressed against your chest like an iron hand, stealing your breath before the killing blow was struck. That silence followed him now as he moved through the ruined forest. Burnt trees clawed at the sky, and the air stank of ash and blood. A monster had passed through here. His instincts told him it was close. Lucian's hand rested on the hilt of his blade, a weapon marked with runes glowing faintly blue in the dying light. His eyes, cold and piercing as if carved from stormlight, searched every shadow. He was a man built for battle, tall, broad-shouldered, muscle carved from years of hunting the things that preyed upon villages and children's sleep. A jagged scar slashed across his jawline, his most visible trophy from a life lived in violence. To many, he was salvation. To others, a butcher. But to Lucian, hunting monsters was nothing more than survival. He moved deeper into the clearing, listening. Then, he stopped. A figure stood at the heart of the devastation, framed in moonlight. She was not what he expected. A woman. She wore a long black dress, fabric flowing like spilled ink around her pale skin. Her hair, raven black falling in soft waves to her waist, caught the moonlight, making it shimmer with a midnight sheen. Her lips were dark as wine, her eyes a strange gray that seemed to drink him in with unsettling calm. She was beautiful, painfully so, but there was something wrong, something too still about her. Lucian's grip on his sword tightened. "Step aside," he commanded, voice rough from years of barking orders at soldiers and terrified villagers alike. "The beast is near. You'll die if you linger." The woman tilted her head, a faint smile curling at the corner of her mouth. Perhaps the beast is already here. The air grew colder. His instincts screamed. Every bone in his body urged him to cut her down where she stood. But his hand did not move. "What are you?" Lucian asked, voice low. The woman's smile deepened, though her eyes remained unbearably sad. "Names have power. You, hunter, may call me Seraphina." The name coiled through his chest like smoke. He should have killed her. Every part of him knew it. But there was something in the way she stood there, fragile and untouchable, like a flame burning in a storm. He found himself lowering his blade, just an inch, but enough. "You shouldn't be here," Lucian said, though his voice lacked the force it should have carried. "Neither should you." The words struck deeper than he expected. He had chased monsters his entire life, always running toward death rather than away from it. And yet this woman, Seraphina, looked at him as though he were the one who was lost. Then the forest moved. A growl rumbled through the trees, deep and hungry. Out of the dark came a beast, towering, twisted, with eyes that burned like coals. It had the body of a wolf, but too many limbs, its skin splitting with patches of bone. Lucian's instincts kicked back into place. His blade was in his hand, glowing bright. "Stay behind me," he barked at Seraphina, planting his boots in the soil. But she did not move. The beast lunged. Lucian met it with a roar, steel flashing. His blade carved across its chest, spilling black blood into the dirt. The monster shrieked, flailing its bone-splintered limbs, but Lucian was faster. He moved with the grace of a man who had fought 1,000 battles and survived them all, striking, dodging, striking again. Still, the creature was strong. Too strong. It hurled him back, slamming his body against a tree trunk. Pain ripped through his ribs. The beast closed in. And that was when Seraphina moved. Her hand lifted, pale fingers spread like glass. Darkness spilled from her palm, pure, inky shadow that coiled around the monster like chains. It screamed as though its flesh burned, thrashing, tearing at itself in desperation. Lucian, still gasping, stared at her. Her gray eyes glowed faintly, her black hair whipping in a wind that wasn't there. She whispered something, words he couldn't understand, and the monster's body convulsed before collapsing into ash. Silence fell. Seraphina lowered her hand, her chest rising and falling with measured breath. Lucian dragged himself to his feet, every instinct screaming at him that he had just witnessed sorcery, dark, dangerous sorcery. The kind whispered about in temples, condemned in villages, burned at stakes. You, his voice cracked. You're no villager, no lost maiden. Seraphina looked at him, her eyes unreadable. And you, Hunter, are not as merciless as the stories claim. You could have killed me the moment you saw me. Lucian's jaw clenched. He wanted to demand answers, to call her what she was, witch, sorceress, abomination. But the words caught in his throat. Because when she stepped closer, moonlight painting her pale skin and black dress in silver fire, he realized something terrifying. He did not want to kill her, and that made her deadlier than any monster he had ever faced. Lucian did not lower his sword, though his grip faltered. The forest stank of burned flesh and shadow, the monster's ashes drifting like black snow around them. Seraphina stood quiet in the moonlight, her black dress swaying gently as though stirred by unseen winds. The strange stillness about her unsettled him more than the beast had. He had fought creatures born of nightmares, faced down horrors that would send hardened men to their graves. Yet this woman, with her storm-gray eyes and soft pale hands, was the one who unsettled him most. "You command shadows," Lucian said at last, his voice sharp as his blade. "That's no gift. That's a curse." Her lips curved faintly, though it was not a smile. "A curse. Or a weapon, not unlike the one you hold in your hand." She tilted her head, watching him with quiet intensity. "We are not so different, you and I, both killers, both feared." The word stung. He had spent years trying to deny what he was, though the blood on his hands told the truth. "Difference is," Lucian muttered, "I kill monsters." "You look like one." Her expression flickered, and for a moment, pain ghosted across her face. Quickly she masked it, her features returning to that unreadable calm. Lucian noticed. He wished he hadn't. "Leave this forest," he said, turning from her. "Whatever you are, stay out of my hunt." But Seraphina's voice followed him, low and unwavering. "If you walk away, Hunter, you will not survive the night." That creature was not alone. Lucian paused, shoulders stiffening. He hated that she was right. The signs had been there. Too many tracks, too many broken trees. That beast had been a scout, not the main predator. Which meant... The growl came before the thought finished. Lucian spun, sword flashing. From the tree line, more creatures emerged. 3 of them this time, larger, stronger, their coal-red eyes glowing in the dark. He clenched his jaw. 1 he could kill. 3? Alone? Even he wasn't that reckless. Seraphina stepped forward, her black dress brushing against his arm as though she belonged at his side. "No," he hissed, catching her wrist before she could move closer. Her skin was cold, colder than it should have been, but soft under his rough palm. "Stay back." Her gray eyes locked with his. "If I stay back, you die." The monsters lunged. Lucian released her and charged, meeting them head-on. His blade cut through one beast's neck, but another slammed into his side, claws tearing through his leather armor. Pain seared his ribs. He roared, stabbing upward, feeling bone crack beneath his sword. Beside him, Seraphina raised her hand again. Shadows poured from her like smoke, wrapping around the 3rd monster, but this one fought harder, resisting her darkness, its limbs thrashing violently, her jaw tightened, her breath coming sharp. Lucian saw her falter. Without thinking, he moved to her side, intercepting the beast that broke her hold, his blade buried deep into its chest, glowing blue as he whispered the old words etched into the steel. The rune flared, burning the creature from the inside out. It collapsed, shrieking until silence returned. Lucian staggered, breath ragged, blood dripping from his side. Seraphina steadied herself, lowering her hand. Her shadows vanished like smoke and wind. When she turned her gaze to him, her storm-gray eyes were softer, almost human again. "You saved me," she whispered. Lucian winced, pressing a hand to his wound. "Don't mistake it for kindness. I need answers, and dead women don't talk." For a moment he expected anger. Instead, she smiled faintly, small, almost tragic. "Then keep me alive, Hunter. Perhaps you'll learn the truth you're so desperate for." They found shelter in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower. The stone walls were half collapsed, vines crawling through cracks, the air heavy with damp moss. Lucian set his sword within reach before lowering himself against the wall, pain grinding at his ribs. Seraphina knelt near him, her long black dress pooling around her. She moved gracefully, almost too carefully, as though every gesture were measured. "You're bleeding," she said softly. Lucian barked a dry laugh. "Took you long enough to notice." Her eyes flicked to his wound, then back to his face. "May I?" He hesitated. He had never allowed strangers near him, especially not witches with shadow magic. But the pain was eating at him and her gaze. "It wasn't cruel." "Fine," he muttered. "Try anything and I'll cut you down." Her cool hands brushed his side as she examined the wound. Her touch was light, careful, yet every brush of her fingers sent an unfamiliar shiver through him. "You are reckless," Seraphina murmured. "You fight as though you do not care whether you live or die." Lucian scowled. "And you talk too much." But her words struck deeper than he liked. As she pressed her palm to his wound, a faint darkness seeped from her skin, curling into his torn flesh. He flinched, but instead of pain, warmth spread through him, knitting torn muscle and sealing skin. Within moments, the bleeding slowed, then stopped. Lucian stared. "You can heal?" "Not in the way you think," she replied quietly, withdrawing her hand. "I do not mend. I take away pain, binding it to myself for a time." He looked at her differently then. Shadows and curses, yes, but also a strange kind of mercy. She caught his stare and quickly turned away, her black hair falling over her face like a curtain. Lucian leaned back against the wall, exhaustion tugging at him. Yet even as he drifted toward sleep, his thoughts tangled around her name, Seraphina, the woman who fought with shadows and sadness in her eyes, the woman who should have been his enemy, the woman who had already begun to unravel everything he thought he knew. Lucian woke to the sound of whispers. The ruined watchtower was quiet, filled only with the sigh of wind through cracks in the stone. But there was another sound, low, melodic, spoken in a language he didn't know. His hand instinctively reached for his sword, fingers brushing the hilt. But then he saw her. Seraphina. She stood near the broken archway, her black dress rippling in the cold night air, her long raven hair streaming around her pale face. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving in those strange words, and around her the shadows stirred. They curled up from the floor, black as ink, dancing like living smoke. It should have terrified him. It did, but there was something else too. The way she stood in the moonlight, fragile and defiant, looked less like a monster and more like a woman trying not to shatter. He pushed himself up slowly, the ache in his ribs dulled by her strange healing. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough, her eyes opened. Gray, stormy, endless. She looked at him with something unreadable. "Keeping them away. The creatures?" She nodded. "They are drawn to me. They always have been. If I do not bind the shadows, they come." Lucian's jaw tightened. "So it's true." "You are cursed." Something flickered across her face. Not anger, not sadness, but weariness. As though she had heard that word her whole life. "Call it what you like," she said softly, "but it is the only reason you still breathe." Lucian had no answer to that. By dawn, they set out together. Lucian hadn't wanted her with him, but he knew better than to walk these woods alone now. She moved beside him with silent grace, her black dress trailing through the ferns, her presence both unsettling and grounding. She did not ask where he was headed. She simply walked, as though she had always belonged at his side. "You don't speak much," she said after a while, her voice light but edged with curiosity. "I speak when there's need. And when there isn't," he glanced at her, "then I keep my silence. Monsters aren't fond of chatter." Her lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile. "Perhaps that's why they hunt me." The words lingered longer than they should have. By midday, they reached a village, or what had once been one. The cottages were burnt shells, the well overturned, the earth black with ash. Silence clung to the ruins like a second skin. Lucian's jaw tightened. He had seen this before, too many times. He moved carefully through the wreckage, his hand resting on his sword. Seraphina followed, her gray eyes tracing the ruins with a quiet sorrow. They weren't killed by men, Lucian muttered, crouching beside claw marks carved deep into the wood. Beasts did this. And yet you still chase them, she said quietly, even knowing what they take from you. Lucian looked at her sharply. You don't know anything about me. Her gaze held his. I know more than you think. Before he could demand what she meant, a sound broke the stillness, a faint cry. Lucian froze. Slowly he turned toward the ruined well. The sound came again, weak, human. He strode over, peering into the collapsed stone. A child, barely more than 10 winters, lay at the bottom, clinging to the rocks with scraped hands. Lucian's heart clenched. He dropped to his knees, reaching down. Hold on! The boy's eyes widened with terror. No, don't let the shadows take me! His gaze shot to Seraphina, and he screamed. Lucian looked back. Seraphina had not moved, but the sunlight cast her in stark relief. Her pale skin, her black dress, the faint curl of darkness that seemed to follow her wherever she went. To the boy, she was no savior. She was the monster. Lucian, Seraphina said quietly, stepping closer. Let me— No! Lucian barked, sharper than he intended. He grabbed the rope from his pack, lowered it down, and hauled the child up himself. His muscles strained, but at last he pulled the boy free. The child clung to him, sobbing, but when his eyes fell on Seraphina again, he shrieked, shoving himself behind Lucian's broad frame. She's one of them, the boy wailed. She's the reason they came! Lucian's jaw tightened. He didn't look at Seraphina. Go, he told the child. Run. Head east until you find the river. Follow it. You'll reach a safe village. The boy hesitated, trembling. But finally he obeyed, sprinting across the blackened earth. Only when he vanished did Lucian stand. He turned to Seraphina at last. She had not moved. Her face was still, but her gray eyes were filled with something raw. You should have let me help him, she whispered. And what would that have done? Lucian snapped. He already thinks you're a curse. You'd have confirmed it. Her shoulders stiffened, but she said nothing. Lucian regretted the words almost instantly. He wasn't sure why. The silence between them as they left the village was heavier than before, filled with all the things neither dared to say. That night, they camped near the edge of a river, the water glimmering silver under the moon. Lucian kept his sword close, though he knew the truth. He was not guarding himself from her anymore. He was guarding himself from what he felt when he looked at her. Seraphina sat by the fire, her black dress pooling like shadows, her pale face lit in gold. She stared into the flames, silent. Lucian found himself speaking before he could stop. Why don't you tell me what you are? Her eyes flicked to him. For once, there was no shield in them, only exhaustion. Would you believe me? Try me, she looked back at the fire. I was born of it. The shadow. My mother was human. My father was something else. Something that should never have touched this world. The darkness lives in me, Lucian. It always has, he frowned. Then why fight the beasts? Her lips curved faintly. Because they are kin to me, and I would rather die than become them. Something twisted in his chest. A woman cursed by her blood, fighting the very thing that defined her. It was a cruel fate, crueler than his own. He said nothing, but when she finally turned her gaze on him, he knew she saw the truth in his silence. For the first time, he didn't see a witch. Or a monster. He saw a woman, carrying a burden too heavy for one soul, and he feared that if he let himself look much longer, he would never be able to look away. The next days blurred into a strange rhythm. Lucian had always hunted alone. His sword was his only companion, silence his only comfort. But now Seraphina walked at his side, her black dress trailing like spilled ink across the earth. Her gray eyes watching everything with unnerving calm. And no matter how many times he told himself to keep his distance, he found himself looking at her. More than once. Too often. At first it was her hands, pale, delicate, yet holding shadows as though they were threads of silk. Then her eyes, storm gray, deep enough to drown him if he wasn't careful. And then her voice. Low, quiet, carrying an ache he couldn't name. She unsettled him, and yet he had stopped wanting her gone. By the third night, they reached the foothills of the Iron Spine Mountains. The peaks loomed above them, jagged black teeth against the sky, snow clinging stubbornly to their crowns. Somewhere within those ridges, Lucian knew, was the den of the creatures he had been tracking for weeks. They camped in a small clearing, the fire crackling weakly against the cold. Seraphina sat close to the flames, her black hair glimmering with copper threads in the light. She pulled her knees to her chest, the fire painting her pale face in fragile gold. Lucian watched her longer than he should have before speaking. "You've done nothing but follow me." "Why?" She looked up at him. Her eyes, usually unreadable, flickered with something sharp. "Because the monsters you hunt are not only your enemies. They are mine. Do you think they roam freely by chance?" "No, they are drawn to me," he frowned. "Then you're the cause." Her lips tightened, but she did not deny it. "Perhaps I'm the reason they don't destroy more than they already have. The shadow in me keeps them from tearing through every village on this land. But the closer I come to losing control," her voice faltered, "the stronger they become." Lucian went still. It struck him, suddenly and terribly, that she wasn't just cursed. She was a gate, a tether between the human world and whatever abyss birthed these monsters. "Why tell me this?" he asked, his tone harsher than he meant. She looked into the fire. "Because you'll kill me when you decide you must. Better you know why your blade will weep when it cuts." The words settled between them like ashes. Lucian said nothing, but his chest ached with something unfamiliar. That night, he woke to a sound. Not the cries of beasts, nor the creak of trees. It was her. Seraphina stood a few steps away, her back to him, her body tense. Her hands shook at her sides, and the shadows writhed around her in thick coils. Her gray eyes burned silver, too bright, too inhuman. "Seraphina," Lucian called, rising to his feet. She didn't answer. The shadows tightened around her, binding her arms like chains. Her lips moved in a strangled whisper. He approached carefully, sword in hand. "Fight it. Whatever it is, fight it," her voice cracked. "I can't. It's stronger. Every day, it's stronger." The shadows lashed outward, striking the trees, splitting bark with unnatural force. Lucian moved fast, catching her wrists in his rough hands. Her skin burned cold beneath his touch, but he didn't let go. "Look at me," he shouted, her storm-gray eyes locked on his, wild with terror. "You are not it," he said, his voice hard, fierce. "You are not the shadow. You are Seraphina. You are the woman who saved my life, the woman who healed my wounds. You are not a monster, do you hear me?" Her breath came in ragged gasps, but slowly, agonizingly, the shadows began to still. They recoiled, slipping back into her skin like smoke returning to a flame. When it was over, she collapsed into him, trembling. Lucian held her, his scarred jaw tight, his chest heaving. He should have pushed her away, should have remembered his vow, but in that moment, with her clinging to him, fragile and fierce all at once, he could only feel the fire in his blood. Her voice was a whisper against his chest. "Why didn't you let me go?" "Because I don't let monsters go," he said roughly. Then, softer, almost broken. "And I don't think you are one." The silence that followed was heavier than any blade. They did not speak much after that. But something had shifted. Lucian felt it in the way she walked closer than before, the way her eyes lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way he caught himself wanting, aching, to touch her again. It was dangerous. It was wrong, but the slow burn of it consumed him more than any battle wound ever had. And when they looked toward the jagged peaks ahead, both knew the war. Waiting there was nothing compared to the one already burning between them. Lucian awoke to the sound of thunder. The storm outside cracked the sky open, rattling the stones of the ruined watchtower where he and Seraphina had taken refuge. He sat upright, hand on the hilt of his sword, instinct sharp as ever. But what he saw was not an enemy. Seraphina sat across from him, black dress pooling around her like spilled ink, her pale face lit by the flicker of lightning. Her black hair framed her face like a halo of shadows, and her dark eyes fixed on him as though she'd been watching him all night. "You don't sleep lightly," she murmured, her voice soft but carrying an edge, like silk over steel. "And you don't sleep at all," Lucian replied, his tone colder than he meant. "Tell me, Seraphina, is it because you can't? Or because you don't dare?" Her lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. "Do you really want the truth?" The tension stretched between them, thick as the storm outside. Lucian didn't answer. He wanted to believe he still had control, that he could treat her like any other dangerous creature he hunted. But every hour spent at her side proved otherwise. She wasn't a monster to him. Not entirely. "Lucian," she said at last, her voice low, "if you knew what I was, what I am, you'd draw that sword without hesitation." He met her gaze, storm in his blue eyes. "And if you knew what I've already done, what I've killed, you'd wonder why I haven't already." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, like the air before a lightning strike. Then the tower doors shuddered. Something outside slammed against them with the weight of a battering ram. Lucian stood instantly, sword drawn. Seraphina rose too, her black dress whispering as she moved. The wood splintered, and in the next heartbeat, creatures poured through. Shadows with claws, their bodies dripping mist and malice. Wraiths. Lucian lunged into the fray, blade flashing silver in the stormlight. He cut one down, then another, but there were too many. The air grew heavy, suffocating, the scent of death crawling into his lungs. "Stay behind me," he barked at Seraphina, instinct commanding him. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped forward. Her pale hand lifted, and from her fingertips spilled a darkness deeper than the storm. Black tendrils unfurling like serpents. They wrapped around the wraiths, pulling them screaming into nothingness. Lucian froze mid-swing, staring. Her eyes glowed faintly now, the darkness in them alive. She moved like something not entirely human, her power beautiful and terrible at once. When the last wraith dissolved into mist, she lowered her hand, her chest rising and falling with quiet restraint. The tower was silent again, except for Lucian's heartbeat. He looked at her, sword still raised, not against the wraiths, but against her. "You're not just cursed," he said, voice hoarse. "You are the curse." Seraphina's lips parted, but she didn't deny it. She only stepped closer, until the tip of his blade nearly touched her throat. "If you mean to kill me, Lucian," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady, "then do it now. Because if you don't, you'll never be able to." His grip on the hilt tightened. Lightning split the sky, throwing her face into sharp relief, her beauty, her danger, her fragility, and her strength all tangled together. And for the first time in years, Lucian, monster hunter, sworn protector of humanity, didn't know what to do. The storm had not ended by morning. It had simply changed its voice. Where the night before it had roared and cracked with fury, now it whispered and growled, as though it had grown tired but not yet spent. The ruined tower where they had taken shelter smelled of damp stone and old ash. The air was heavy, and every drop of rain that fell through the broken roof seemed to echo in the silence between them. Lucian had not slept. His body ached from the battle with the wraiths, but it wasn't exhaustion that kept him awake. It was her. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the way the shadows had curled from her fingers, the way the monsters had screamed as they were pulled apart. He had spent a lifetime watching death wear faces both beautiful and grotesque, but nothing had ever shaken him like the sight of her power. She hadn't moved from her spot by the dead hearth. Seraphina sat cross-legged, her black dress pooling around her like a stain of ink, her long hair falling in damp tangles around her pale face. In the flicker of dying stormlight, she looked less like a woman and more like something carved out of night itself. For hours, neither had spoken. Until at last, her voice cut through the silence. "Say it." Lucian, leaning against the broken wall, shifted just enough to glance at her. His hand rested loosely on the hilt of his sword. "Say what?" Her dark eyes rose to meet his. Say you'll kill me. He studied her face, every pale line of it, the faint quiver in her mouth that she tried to hide. Do you want me to? Her chin lifted, defiant though her voice trembled. No, but you should. His jaw clenched, muscles hard as stone. He wanted to throw the words back at her, cut the conversation short before it could dig deeper. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped forward, boots scraping against the loose stone. You think I don't know that? He said, his voice low and ragged. You think I haven't thought of it? Every hour since I met you, I've wondered if my blade should already be in your heart. And yet, it isn't. Her voice cracked, breaking past the composure she had wrapped around herself. Why, Lucian? You've killed for less. I can see it in your eyes. The blood of 100 creatures on your hands, every one of them condemned for whispers and shadows. But I am no whisper. I showed you what I am. Why is your blade still at your side? Lucian's fists tightened at his sides. His chest rose and fell as though each breath was a battle. He wanted to lie, to tell her it was strategy, hesitation, weakness, but the truth clawed at him too fiercely. Because I don't know if I want to kill you, he admitted, voice hoarse. His eyes darkened, stormy and unrelenting. Or keep you. Her breath hitched, just barely. You're a fool, she whispered. Her hands curled into her dress. I'm not something to keep. I'm the storm that tears kingdoms apart, the shadow that devours everything it touches. You don't keep me, Lucian. You survive me. For the first time, he allowed himself to cross the space between them fully. The storm outside pressed at the broken stones, thunder rumbling like the growl of some ancient beast. But his focus was only on her. He crouched before her, his roughened hand lifting, trembling slightly as though afraid to bridge the final distance. And then his calloused palm cupped her jaw. Her skin was cold, almost unnaturally so, but alive. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if the touch burned and soothed in equal measure. You're wrong, he murmured, his thumb brushing the hollow of her cheek. I've survived worse. But you... His voice faltered raw. You're the first thing I've wanted to survive for. Her eyes opened, shining with something too fragile to name. For one suspended breath, it was as though the entire world had gone still. Her lips parted, hovering so close to his that the storm could have carried her breath into his lungs. His heart pounded, thunder and blood and need, every oath he had ever sworn buckling beneath the weight of her nearness. But then she pulled back. It wasn't rejection. It was fear. Fear sharper than any blade. She rose in one sudden motion, the black folds of her dress whispering against the stone, her dark hair whipped in the wind seeping through the tower's cracks. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking like glass. If you keep me, you'll lose everything. Your oath, your name, your life. Her eyes glistened as she turned toward the archway, the storm's gray light outlining her like a phantom. And worse, Lucian. I'll lose you. He surged to his feet, heart thundering. Seraphina, but before he could reach her, she was gone. The storm swallowed her silhouette as though she had never been there at all. Lucian stood alone in the ruined tower, the echo of her words clinging to the stone. His hand still tingled where it had touched her cheek. For years, he had been the hunter who walked into darkness without hesitation. But now, as the rain drummed against his shoulders, Lucian knew with unshakable certainty he would chase her, not as a hunter, but as a man. The storm had dragged itself into morning, gray and relentless. The rain was no longer violent. It came down steady, cold, soaking through cloak and skin alike, seeping into bone. The world smelled of wet earth and iron, of ash still smoldering in the ruins below. Lucian followed her trail through the forest as though fate itself had carved it for him. There were no footprints, no bent branches. She had left no sign for any hunter to follow. But he was no longer just a hunter. He knew her now in ways that had nothing to do with skill or instinct. He knew how her silence carried meaning, how her presence pressed against the air, how even absence itself bent in her shape. That was how he found her. Seraphina stood at the edge of a cliff, black dress plastered against her body from the rain, her hair streaming like ink in the wind. The valley stretched endlessly below, a vast hollow carved out of stone and mist. At its center, the ruins of a fallen kingdom loomed like broken teeth. From that place, Shadows stirred faintly, crawling across the land like veins of black fire. Lucian's heart clenched. The truth had been waiting all along, and now he saw it clearly. She wasn't running from the darkness. She was bound to it. The storm had not broken her. It had revealed her. He approached quietly, boots sinking into the sodden earth. For a moment he simply stood behind her, watching the fragile curve of her shoulders, the pale line of her throat, the way her hands trembled as she clutched the jagged stone at the cliff's edge. She looked so human, so breakable, and yet the valley below obeyed her. "You shouldn't have followed me." Her voice was calm, but thin. A whisper unraveling. "You knew I would," he said. Finally, she turned to him. Her eyes were dark pools, brimming with a grief so deep it seemed endless. Rain streaked her face, though he couldn't tell if some of it was tears. "You think this ends with us together," she said, "that I can be saved, that you can stand between me and what I am. But that's not the story, Lucian. That's not who I am." His jaw tightened. He looked at her, not as the cursed thing, not as the shadow of ruin, but as the woman who had laughed, however briefly, at his rough humor. The woman who had flinched at kindness, as though it hurt worse than cruelty. "Then tell me who you are," he said, voice low. She inhaled sharply. "I am the end. The shadows don't hunt me. They don't curse me. They answer me. I'm not running from them, Lucian. I'm leading them. The night will rise, kingdoms will burn, and when the world screams for a name to blame, it will be mine." The words sliced through him, leaving no room for denial. His throat ached, but still he asked, "Then why did they attack us in the tower?" Her expression faltered, the mask slipping. She swallowed hard. "Because I ordered them to. Because I thought, if you saw me for what I am, you'd end it. You'd kill me before it was too late." The rain blurred everything for a moment, but he didn't move, didn't breathe. The air between them pulsed with the weight of what she had confessed. "You wanted me to kill you." The words left him raw, jagged. She nodded once, almost violently. "Yes, because it would be easier than this. Easier than standing here knowing that I want you to stay when I should want you gone." Something in him broke. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his hand closing around her arm, pulling her back from the crumbling edge. "Don't," he growled, voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare decide for me." Her body trembled in his grasp, but she didn't fight. Not fully. Her eyes searched his, desperate and pleading. "You don't understand. If you choose me, you choose ruin. Every oath you've taken, every soul you've saved, every night you swore to stand against the dark, you'll lose it all. You'll lose yourself. Then let me," he said, his voice breaking open like a wound. "Because I've been a hunter my whole damn life, and all it's given me is a graveyard of silence. But with you," he pressed his forehead to hers, rain dripping between them, breaths harsh and uneven. "With you, I feel alive. And I'd rather burn alive than keep living as ash." Her lips parted, trembling, her breath catching against his. "You're a fool." "Maybe." His hand slid to cradle her face, his thumb brushing the curve of her cheek. "But I'm your fool." The moment stretched, trembling on the edge of breaking. She could have pushed him away, could have whispered the word that would make the shadows tear him apart. But she didn't. Instead, her hands fisted in his tunic, pulling him closer, as though she couldn't bear to do the opposite. And then they kissed. It was not soft. It was not tender. It was a collision of storm and fire, desperate and consuming, years of silence and denial breaking open all at once. His mouth was fierce against hers hungry against his, as though both of them knew the world might end, and wanted nothing left unsaid. The rain poured over them, lightning splitting the sky, shadows shifting restlessly in the valley below. When they broke apart, their foreheads stayed pressed together, breaths ragged, lips still brushing as though neither could let go. Her voice was a whisper, trembling but steady. "Then you'll burn with me." His answer came without hesitation, rough and certain. "Then let it burn." The valley below stirred as if hearing the vow. From the ruins, dark shapes uncoiled, wraiths rising like smoke, their forms shimmering in the mist. The world trembled, as though waiting for the first command. But on the cliff, in the rain, none of it mattered. They were no longer hunter and curse, no longer blade and shadow. They were simply Lucian and Seraphina, and whatever the world became after this moment, it would have to endure them together.